Well, good evening. A very warm welcome to our last Founder and Investor Talk for this summer term season. Let me introduce you and welcome today Georg Hauer, today with us from N26. He will share N26 lessons learned in bringing a FinTech company to a unicorn, basically. A little bit to the background of Georg. Georg joined N26 1.5 years ago, I would say, and is the general manager for the DACH region. Before that, you had a general management position or general manager position with Uber, and before that, several years, 6 years or even 7 years with Boston Consulting. So lots of experience bringing into this company and helping with the journey. N26 went in the last 6 years, basically, from a very small company which started originally a different way, like so often. The co-founders started off with, I'd say, an app that was supposed to be a digital pocket money app, kind of, for parents to distribute the pocket money for the children. But of course, quite soon they figured out that this is a niche market and not really something to scale, and they came up with a different plan, the N26 plan, if I know well enough, a pan-European bank. And you know how the story went from this idea to now, these 6 years, Georg is going to share with us today. So from a journey on disrupting the old company in banking sector to grow from 2 people founding up and starting up to more than 1,000 people by now. And I'm already curious and looking forward to all your questions you have, and I ask you to wait until he's finished with his presentation and come with the Q&A with your questions, okay? So a very warm welcome on stage, Georg.
Thank you. May I ask, who of you knows what N26 is doing? Please raise your hand. All right, that's the majority. Who of you does not know it? 2, 3, all right. Who of you has an account with N26? All right, it's pretty decent, but there's still a lot of room to grow. Anyways, what N26 is doing, for the 3 people of you who do not know it, we're a startup, we're a bank, and we're a technology company, all at the same time. However, at the end of the day, we're much more than that, because we are a promise to our customers, a promise to deliver a completely different approach to banking and bring a digital user experience which has never been experienced before in banking. People nowadays are used to mobile apps, listening to music at Spotify or watching movies at Netflix, but people don't understand why their bank doesn't look and isn't as convenient as the other apps they're using on their laptop or their smartphone. And last but not least, it's also the price. We promised to deliver a more transparent and at the end of the day also just cheaper pricing, because it's free. And this was the initial vision we started with. And as you all know, any startup has to start with one first idea. There has to be a promise to customers, to promise to future customers, and a clear vision where you want to grow to. For those of you who do not know it so well, or at least haven't experienced the account yet, when we started, we figured out that we needed certain USP. We need to be special in a certain way, and we needed to be remembered for something. So we looked at every single banking process which existed, from the opening of the account to doing all the transaction to experiencing customer service. And we tried to question every single of those processes and ask ourselves, is that really the best we can do? Is that really the best service a customer can experience? And more often than not, the answer was no. So we decided, why not offering an account opening within 8 minutes? directly from your smartphone. Because back then, that was 2013, that was completely a new innovation. Back then, in order to open an account, you had to go to a bank branch, wait for an advisor to have time for you, sit down, spend maybe 20 to 30 minutes with that person. That person gave you several dozens of forms which you sign. Please sign here, on by the way here, and I need a copy of your passport, your personal ID, a copy of your income statement, etc. And we said we can do that a lot better, and we can do that fully digitally. But it's much more, because in our opinion, customers do not need branches anymore, because they are just not tired to go to a branch for opening the account. However, they really don't want them anymore. We want to promise them you can bank with us absolutely anywhere, wherever you are and wherever your phone is. Because if there's one thing you carry around with you all the time, that's your phone. So, of course, nowadays, every bank has their banking app. However, you will realize if you need something a little bit more special, the bank app might tell you, oh, that is something you can't do on your phone. Please go to your desktop version. Or please go to the branch if you can't do that. I remember I moved to the United States in 2013 and had to transfer my landlord the first deposits for the apartment, which I had rented without seeing. So there was a bit risk involved. So I wanted to transfer the amounts to the landlord via my Sparkasse account. It didn't work. So I was sitting on the hotline and asking the guy, please walk me through. And we tried it several times and it didn't work. And then I said, you know what, just come to the branch and we'll do it together. That's what I did. I didn't have much choice. Went to the branch. So we went through this form together, which is, as you know, these old forms with double-sided paper where it's directly printed onto a second paper. And then the person is asking, so you want to transfer that money? Do you want to have it fast, express service, or regular service? So I asked him, so what's the difference? Well, he said, express service takes 4 to 7 days. Express service takes 3 days, and the regular service takes 5, 7 days or more. So I asked him, so how does this work? This is a piece of paper. How does this technically work? Because I was curious. Well, I said, the difference is, you see this pile of forms? It's the difference is whether I put it in the top or in the bottom. Well, we don't do that. You can do everything digitally from our app. And last but not least, we said we don't only want to support banking needs for our customers, but we want to support people to manage and organize their finances. So what we introduced last summer, about a year ago, is something we call it spaces. It's basically sub-accounts to organize your finances within one big account. Because at the end of the day, it makes a difference where you store your money. Whether you want to put aside money for your next vacation, buying the next piece of furniture, or potentially putting money aside for a big present you want to give to someone's wedding. Because if you have all your money on your account, what you need on a short midterm, and everything that you want to put aside on the long term, which is the savings account, there's something in the middle that you will need only in the next couple of weeks, maybe months, which was not really worth it to put it aside in a savings account, and we help organize that in these little buckets, what you see. And a trick what we're going to do in future is what is going to launch fairly fast, something called shared spaces. Imagine you're essentially then sharing one of those organized buckets with your roommate, then you can manage your entire shared flat bill together, fully digitally, without signing forms. However, I was talking before, everything started with a small idea. Every startup starts with a small idea. And today I would like to share with you the 5 most important learnings that we had from developing to a 2-people startup to a 1,000 plus organization that spans globally. And that is that even the smallest idea, even the biggest idea, starts with a really small and first step. No matter where it comes from, no matter who invents it. At the beginning, every idea sounds a little bit crazy. And in fact, to put it correctly, every idea really worth focusing on and dedicating your life to is a little bit, or has to be, a little bit crazy at the beginning. So when our 2 founders in 2013 sat it in their apartment here in Vienna, and decided and took the decision, we want to change banking as we know it today. That was a pretty insane idea. A lot of people were laughing, and it took them quite a while to get the support needed. However, it worked eventually. More than 1.5 years later, they had a first product ready. The first 5 test customers had their account. You can imagine most of those people were related to the founders. And as you know, may I ask, who of you is actually a founder? Of future founders? All right, so the actual founders are all hiding in the back, and then the new ones here. All right, cool. So founders among you know every product that you produce, you better start with an MVP where you really have a rough idea what you want to deliver, and you want to see how people use it. You want to see how people react to it, and what you can improve. Well, that was the MVP people were testing back then with the 5 customers. And then they onboarded 20, and then 50, then 100. And interestingly, by March 2016, we had 125,000 customers. And we're really proud of that, because no other mobile bank, the word challenger bank hadn't been invented back then, had achieved that. 125,000 people entrusting you their money. But there something very special happened. It's actually felt a lot more special inside the company than outside, but the impact was massive. Until then, N26 had worked together with a bank partner. So N26 was actually the app, and there was in the background a bank partner. In summer 2016, N26 received their bank license and became its own proper bank. It was the first FinTech that received a bank license at that speed. And it has an enormous impact, because banking, you can imagine, is like an iceberg. The 10% is what you see, and the rest is all the value you create, the value chain that is hidden behind. However, having full control over the entire picture, you can deliver a much better service, much better technology, and really speed up every single process. And at the end of the day, there's also a lot more profit to be made. So in fact, this getting our own bank license, that was the path to long-term profitability. And plus, and that was a big topic in order to build trust, since then we're protected under the German deposit protection, where every customer's account is protected up to 100,000 euros per customer. And that is obviously the same protection as any other German bank has, and it's super important to make sure to win the trust of customers, because they know we are now as regulated as any other bank in Germany and in Europe. Well, the next year worked pretty well. By September 2017, we had 500,000 customers. Huge milestone for N26. And at that point, we realized the potential for customers is much bigger than our current market. So we scaled. Our home markets were Germany and Austria. Those were the markets where we have been present. However, in late 2016, we scaled to 17 more countries. So essentially, almost the entire European Union, especially Western European, and almost the entire Eurozone. And that worked pretty well as well. So in January 2019, we reached 2.5 million customers. And you see the growth is growing. So basically, one of the main KPIs we're looking at is not the number of new customers we're getting per week, but the growth of the growth. So what is the learning from that? Number one learning for us here was that as an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you have to solve a real problem. If you don't solve one of the top problems of your customers, they will ignore you. If you solve only problem number 10 of a potential customer, most likely they will forget about you. But if you solve a problem that is among your top 3 problems, that is so painful that people have been searching for an alternative solution already for a long time, then you've hit the right nail. Then you really manage to get the awareness of the customers, and even better, if people like it, people start talking about it. And that's how we mainly grow. Our number one growth channel is that people recommend our product to other people that face the same problem. And frankly speaking, shitty banking is a pretty common problem among the entire global population. So every product starts with a problem. So we need to quantify the problem. So we looked at various studies, and what's interesting, and this is a statistic that I'm bringing a lot to banking conferences, because I'm speaking a lot to bankers. I mean, I personally enjoyed talking a lot more to founders and students, but I do have to spend some part of my time talking to bankers. Yesterday I was in Zurich, and it's funny that very often, if you ask typical traditional bankers, people will tell you, yes, we need to change, the industry needs to change, other banks need to change, but we are already quite established. Our culture, well, we talk already about innovation. We talk already about customers. And at the end of the day, it's still just going to be a trend. No one, to quote a board member of Deutsche Bank, with whom I was sitting at a panel a few weeks ago, they don't believe in online-only banking. It's crazy that senior executives of the largest banks in Germany and Austria do not believe in online-only banking. Well, I have news for you. Among young people, this is not a surprise. 7 out of 10 millennials say they rather go to the dentist than their bank branch. So in fact, N26, and this is the main misunderstanding that people have, especially traditional bankers have of our company, we do not attract customers despite the fact that we do not have banks or that we do not have bank branches, but because of it. Because we have the promise that you will never ever go to a bank branch with us. You will never ever need to talk to an advisor who will make you sign forms. You will be able to do everything digitally. And if there's a problem, we'll be happily support you with our massive customer service organization in 5 languages. Ideally, in our vision, 24/7. That's something which a traditional bank will never be able to offer with their branches. So our solution was to bring really everything to the smartphone. At the beginning, when we were an app, we focused on design and product to make every process extremely smooth and elegant, to really put product and design in the center of our vision. Then when we became a bank, we optimized processes in the background. But ultimately, customer experience was one of the #1 topics we wanted to optimize for. So this is our vision. And this is important because we do not, if you look at that one, we saw the numbers before. We grew to 2.5 million customers. But our objective is not to become the world's largest bank. Our objective is not even to become Austria's largest bank. We also do not want to become the most profitable bank in the world or the one with the most highest revenue. We want to become the bank that the world truly loves to use. And it's a very different thing to optimize for. It's very difficult to understand for traditional bankers because people think, well, everyone needs to think about profit first. Isn't it, right? Well, no. Because what we are saying is we are optimizing for customer satisfaction. And if the customer is satisfied, we know that every new customer who is satisfied brings us 3 new customers for free because they recommend it. And if we manage to satisfy those 3 customers as well, we get another 3 customers from each of them. And at the end of the day, then we have 9 customers from the first one without paying much investments. While traditional banks spend somewhere between 400 and 1,200 euros in customer acquisition costs for a retail customer. That's completely insane. You have to earn that money back as a bank somehow. But if you almost get customers for free because just the product is good, then of course you can hand down this cost benefit to our customers and just not charge anything. So our next learning was company culture can be a USP. USP stands for unique selling proposition or differentiator. So what makes us different to other companies or other banks? And this is a crucial one. The #1 problem of traditional banks is their culture. They're so restrictive in permitting innovation that no matter how many millions of euros they're going to throw at consultants or throw at random projects and then shut them down again, no matter how much they're going to spend on that, they're never going to be truly innovative because it's their culture that prohibits that. At least, I mean, obviously there are varying degrees between traditional banks. In fact, some traditional banks, you almost have the feeling they completely gave up on online banking. Some others, and by the way, it's not my statement, that's the quote of chief editor of one of the largest newspapers in Austria. And on the other side, there are some banks that certainly do invest quite a bit. But the #1 problem for these massive organizations, I'm not just talking about banks, but for companies in general, is not having a flexible and innovative company culture that really permits innovation. And for us as a startup, this was crucial from the very beginning on, because we knew we were not your regular startup. We were ultimately also a bank. When we applied for the banking license, we had 20 employees. 20. There was no other bank or no other company in Austria that applied for a banking license only after 1.5 years of existence and with 20 employees. However, we made sure from the very beginning that our company culture did not only reflect the fast-paced startup environment, but also the one of a highly professionally managed bank. So of the first 20 employees, 2 of them were former executives from banks. So you can imagine like people in their 50s who were used to wearing suit and ties, now running around in our office with hoodies. But it's not the clothes that really make company culture, and that's again a misconception of a lot of banks or companies are doing. It's not the hoodie that brings innovation, although a lot of companies would like that. But it's ultimately a flexibility and a mindset that you allow people to try out new experiments, you give them resources, and you just also allow them to fail. So company culture is especially important for us because right now we're not a German bank, we're not a German company either. We are a European bank now, and we are also not only a European company, but we are truly a global one. We have right now 5 offices. We've just announced recently that we're going to open a technology and innovation hub here in Vienna. We're actually hiring now 300 people here in Vienna in the next 3 years. Currently, we're searching the first 30. And we have 60 plus nationalities. So we are a truly international company. And what's interesting is if you have people from all around the world, extremely diverse teams also in terms of background, you can suddenly build a product that truly serves a global need. Because we do not only try to first build a German product and then try to localize it to other countries and other cultures, but we build an international and global product first. We try to understand how can we build a product that serves both Austrian, Portuguese, British, French, Brazilian and American customers all at the same time. So Brazil and the US, so US first is going to be the next big milestone for us. Brazil is going to happen in the midterm. The next country right in the middle is going to be Switzerland, which is the one blank spot in the middle of Europe that was still missing. But at the end of the day, we attract people who want to be entrepreneurs, who really want to create something great, want to change the way we do banking today, and work in an incredibly international team. But at the same time, be willing to not only try out a lot of fun stuff and new things, but also are able to think in a very structured manner, which is required to be a bank. We do try to separate certain parts of the functions. So for example, the compliance division, that doesn't have to be a complete quirky, complete fun place like some of the other parts of the startups. And our design team on the other side their office looks very different out of choice, obviously, because we do allow that people can choose their own way of working. However, one of the most important positions we hired in order to facilitate this company culture were 2 things. One was the head of workplace happiness. I love this position. Essentially, a person that is really responsible, ultimately optimizing for happiness. That's a lot of things. And among his team is a pretty big team that is the real estate project team. Because if we are opening so many new offices, we need to make sure our offices are one of the most inspiring places you can possibly imagine. Because our product teams, our tech teams, need to create products that are completely unrivaled and completely extraordinary in comparison to anything that has been built before in banking. So we need to provide inspiring places. Next, learning. I mentioned it already before. Part of the company culture needs to be an acceptance to failure. It's not enough if a company says, yes, we promote innovation, we promote entrepreneurship, but then if your project fails, you're going to be put aside and said, oh, sorry, you were not successful. To quote our founders, he's asking our teams, I want only one thing from you when you experiment. Please fail fast. Why? Well, there's no question that people are going to fail. If you try out some new, really revolutionary ideas, some of them are going to fail. what we want from our team members is that you recognize this really fast. Because in reality, a failure isn't a failure. A failure is just another step to success. Because it's just a regular part of the learning process. You fail, you iterate, you fail, you iterate, and every single step in iteration, your product is going to be better. And after failing 100 times, your failure are going to be better than the successes of other people at the very beginning who never failed. N26 would have never existed if we failed not numerous times. One of the first big failures was that initially the idea had been, as was mentioned before, to create something a little bit smaller. There had always been this massive idea, we want to change banking as we do it nowadays. However, the founders thought, let's try something small at the beginning. Let's create a pocket money app where parents can transfer money to their children, give them a card in their name, and have them spend their money, but have always full control over it, because the parents had the app on their phone. Well, you know what? Those people of you who know or who use N26, what is one of the first features that pops up when you think about how we were at the very beginning? What made us different than some of the other banks when we launched? Moneybeam, one. It was not the first thing. What was one of the first things?
It told you where the money is spent.
Yeah, the statistics, but something else. Yeah, sorry, you said it?
You see it when you spend it.
Yeah, correct. So what the colleague means is every time you spend, there's a pop-up notification instantly telling you, oh, yes, correct, this transfer action is correct. I just spent 15 euros at Hofer, and I see it on my phone in real time. Well, the origin of this feature was that parents know when their children are spending the money. That was the origin of this feature. And when we introduced it in the regular bank, we were the first bank to introduce it. Now, dozens of banks, or if not more, have copied this feature. But we were the first one to introduce it because we were coming from a completely different idea. But what was interesting, when the founders started and had the first 3,000 customers onboarded, or maybe 5,000, and were tracking their behavior, what they saw is that more than 2/3 of the users were not the children, but were the parents. And so initially they thought, oh my God, we failed. Our product apparently does not make any sense because our target audience is children, and the conclusion could have been, children are not using our app. Well, the actual conclusion that the founders made is, we are focusing on the wrong customer audience. We need to pivot. And a pivot is nothing else, but you realize you were running into a direction that was a dead end, or at least not the optimal end. So one could say they failed. But this failure made them much better in what they're doing, and only was one of the main reasons to bring them where we are now. Another big fuck up was we wanted to build then, well, we thought, it's going to be difficult to build a bank right away. Let's partner up with a traditional bank. Let's offer them to build a banking app for them, to experience and learn with them. Well, we're going to every single of the traditional banks in Austria, and to many also in Germany, speaking to the management and explaining them the story. Well, you can imagine that was back in 2014 or end of 2013. The executives were laughing, said, guys, you have no idea of banking. You have no idea of our customers, because we understand our customers much better than you guys. And we don't need you because, by the way, we have a couple of developers that are doing a good job. Well, the problem was, well, it was not a problem. In fact, after being declined by dozens of banks, the founders again thought, okay, that approach clearly failed. However, again, if you think about, if even a single traditional bank would have said, yes, let's gonna do that, N26 wouldn't have 2.5 million customers, but would be at best an app of a traditional bank. 9 months later, Erste Bank got Georg into the organization. So they clearly learned from their mistake. And for us, it worked pretty well. All these failures accumulated to a valuation of 2.7 billion, with initially a lot of very passionate angel investors investing into N26, followed by a bunch of very visionary venture capitalists, to nowadays very traditional investors like Allianz. Couldn't imagine a more traditional company to invest into us, or the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Singapore, which manages the money of the state of Singapore. But ultimately, and that's my last learning I would like to share with you today, is because some of you, I mean, who has been already raising funds, even for also from angel investors, or is planning to do in the next 12 months? You wanna? A bunch of you guys. So the really important learning from us was, investors are nice. They bring you money. That's important. Money is nice, of course. But investors are actually worth much more than their money. In fact, the insights that investors bring to you are typically worth much more than the money they bring to. It might not feel like this at the very beginning. However, over time, if you chose wisely, if you chose good investors, if you chose the right ones, they will have contributed to your company, to your business, in many ways other than investments. And what are these insights? Well, for example, when I was mentioning that what kind of investments are relevant? Well, it's connections, it's business connections, it's feedback. Feedback is very important. It's connections to suppliers, it's new ideas, it's potential market entry knowledge. But last but not least, very important, it's people, employees, team members. Why does that matter for a startup, for a venture capitalist? Well, I was mentioning among the first 20 employees, there were 2 senior executives from other banks. If we hadn't been introduced by our investors to those former board members and CEOs from other banks, and that those executives trusted our investors, that, guys, this is a really interesting, trustworthy startup, you might check it out, we most likely wouldn't ever have been speaking to them. So having the trust that investors exude is one of the most critical topics that you might get from investors. And it's, by the way, not just a name. The investors need to be a little bit more, doing a little bit more, from introductions to actually sitting down with you, and especially at the very beginning, challenging you in a more operational level. But making you a stronger team can be one of the most important contributions. So what's next for N26? I mentioned we're launching in the US pretty fast. You're going to hear from us quite soon. And this is quite exciting, because that means if our plan succeeds to become one of the most relevant banks in the US, we will manage something what all European politicians talk about. Because building a global market leader made here in Europe. And in fact, I'm very proud that we can even say made here in Austria. Because think about it. Social media, that's in Silicon Valley. Search engine, even if German politicians want it, there's never going to be a European Google. It's never going to be a European search engine that's dominating the market. However, FinTech is the one area, might be one of the last areas where there is no American global market leader. And in fact, if you look at the competition right now, chances are very likely that the future global market leader in finance, in mobile banking, will be a European one. And that's extremely exciting. Extremely exciting. So, to conclude, you start with good ideas. Good ideas are just the first seeds of creating a company. It's just a small, minor thing, because in relationship to all the execution that follows and that really matters, the good idea is just a small ingredient. However, it is the first one. And as I was mentioning, the first one starts with a first small step. And this first small step can be really done absolutely anywhere. And I would be extremely excited to hear in 5 years from now that one of you have built up a business that not only in Austria, but the entire world is speaking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insights. So I'm asking you again, you know already the procedure, questions to be asked. Who wants to start? Okay, then let's start here.
Right. Thank you very much for this interesting talk. I'm one of the students from the i²c program from Incubator at the university. I have two short questions. The first one would be, so you said a great focus in your everyday routine on the user experience. Do you see any chance to protect your IP there? And second question, what happened to Switzerland? Why is it so special? Why you haven't still launched there?
So, do I understand correctly? The first question is, how do we protect our IP? Right. Correct, yeah. So, user experience is obviously completely visible. So, you can't protect that someone is copying the user experience. In fact, many banks did. However, as it is always in life, innovation is not about a point where you are. That's not a position. Innovation is a mindset, and it's a speed. So we are not proud of being great at a certain point in time, but we invest into innovation and new customer experience at any given time, and always try to stay ahead 12 to 24 months ahead of our competition. Because what matters is not only anticipating how we're going to solve future problems. However, it is building a flexible tech and product organization that is strong enough that you can create an idea and implement it and bring it to the market within a very short time period. For us, we managed to do it within, if we have a very important topic that we really want to implement, a very important product, we can implement it within 3 months, from start to launch. A traditional bank typically has product cycles for big products somewhere between 12 and 18 months. So even if we start the development at the same time as a traditional bank, we're still going to have a head start of at least 12 months. However, we do protect our IP as well. One important factor is we do 100% of our code in-house. We haven't outsourced a single line of code, ever. Why? Because this is our core competency. Our product team, product and tech team, we have currently 400 people, and we're growing extremely fast in that area. And as most of you know, you can't protect code other than through copyright, but that's a very weak protection because someone might just find a different way of writing that code. But what you can do is making sure that, first of all, the way you write it is completely internally. So it's very hard to really fully understand how our source code is structured. And at the other side, making sure that you're just fast in innovating and always stay ahead. but frankly speaking, we do go strong, long lengths to protect our IP from having extremely tight security on all our offices, partially also to make sure that we don't have any spies. I mean, let's be honest, industrial espionage is a big problem for globally, and we make sure that people have a safe environment to work. Second question, Switzerland. Well, if you ask Swiss people, they will tell you that Switzerland has always been special. And other than not being in the EU, not being in the European Economic Area, otherwise having not the euro and having a different regulator and our regular bank license not working in Switzerland, those are the main reasons. Now we got a permit from the local regulator, and that's why we are now able to roll out in Switzerland as well.
Hi, I'm a former student here from the TU, and I've been in banking for 18 years in parallel. And you mentioned that your business is banking, but I'm trying to understand more specifically what specifically do you mean as banking? Because there's many types. There's for example, payment processing. There's a lending business, investment banking. It's actually a two-part question. What specifically is your banking business? And second, what do you see as your current and future major source of revenue?
Mm-hmm. So we have a bank license that is a full bank license. So theoretically, based on our license, we could technically offer anything. We could start selling mortgages. We're not going to do that. But to come to that, our business model is retail banking, but they're very much focused on certain banking processes that have been quite ignored by traditional banks. And so we are really focusing on retail banking on the daily financial decisions. That's the checking account, that's card payments, that's payments between friends, that is international transactions, international card payments. For example, we are not charging any foreign exchange fee. That's quite a strong argument for people just using us while traveling. And last but not least, organizing your finances. And then we've started to expand to new businesses like credit. We offer overdraft credit in Austria. We have a consumer lending business in Germany and France already. And we've started with our premium accounts also selling essentially selling packages for example, travel insurances. So we've expanded our business step by step, but as a startup, at the very beginning, one is laser focused on what we can do really well and what we can do better than other banks. And we don't try to get too distracted by other banks. So we do not try to offer a full portfolio of everything from pension funds to mortgages anytime soon. Second question was, how do we make money and how do we intend to make money? We have currently 3 pillars of revenue. The first one, and that was also the first one how we started, was the interchange fee. Do you know what that is? No. Interchange fee means every single time when you pay with your MasterCard, may it be Amazon, Uber, Hofer, Austrian Airlines, wherever you pay, the merchant pays MasterCard and through MasterCard us a tiny fee. Tiny fee. That's essentially what a lot of merchants or a lot of people call it the credit card fee. It's not called like that, but it's pretty much, it's easier to understand. And this fee is regulated. How much do you think? How much do we make? What percentage do we make per transaction? 4%? 4%?
I guess lower, because
3%?
I guess 2%.
So how much do we get? Because the credit card fee theoretically can be negotiated by MasterCard, but how much do we get? 0.1. 0.1? 1.7. Well, you were closest. It's 0.2%, and that's a regulated amount. Every bank every issuance bank in entire Europe, in the EU, gets exactly that amount. So that's nothing special. So it's not a special revenue stream for us because it's the same as for any other issuance bank. What makes it special, however, is that for other banks, this is a very minor business, because you have to think about, until 10 years ago, this fee wasn't 0.2%. This fee was 2%. And then once, as far as I remember, in 2012 or 2013, the EU regulated this business because the EU stated, we want to increase the number of card payments. We want to increase that people pay more cashless. And because of that, more merchants need to accept cards. And how do you make merchants to accept cards? Well, you lower the fees. So the EU regulated and said, you know what? We're going to decrease it by 90%. And you know what the reaction of banks was? Deutsche Bank, UBS, Commerzbank, they were actual considerations. Let's get out of retail banking. Because retail banking really isn't paying off anymore. Retail banking is so highly regulated, it's so expensive to invest into compliance that if you cut 90% of the revenue, if you're dependent on that business model and if you don't have other business models, for example, having high fees, monthly fees, or you have a big credit business, then you're doomed. Because no matter how the cost structure of a traditional bank was, if you're used to 2%, you're going to be dead with 0.2. Well, we were built during a time when it was known it's going to be 0.2%. And we still went in that business model because we knew in the financial crisis in 2008, retail banks truly lost the trust of their customers. Trust went like this. And by the way, also applications to banks went like this. When I was studying in Vienna, one of the most popular jobs was let's go into investment banking. It's crazy. Back then, everyone wanted to do that. Since 2008, no one wants to do that. Because it's one of the least sexy industries you can possibly imagine. And traditional banking is even worse. Well, that wasn't just about employment, but it was also about customers. And banks were so busy with regulating themselves and making sure that wouldn't fuck up again and creating another financial crisis that they completely ignored retail banking for many years. And that was the reason why we went in and said we can really change that business model. And the business model has been completely ignored by so many other banks, so we're going to exploit that. So that is our number one revenue stream. Who wants to think about what's our second revenue stream? Yes, black and metal cards are our two premium models. These are increasingly becoming popular, and essentially what it is premium cards that we sell also insurance package together with it. It's cheaper because we buy it in bulk. It's much cheaper than if you would buy this travel insurance by yourself from Allianz. But still, we sell it at a price where we can make a decent margin. So it's a win-win situation for us and for the customer. And that's our second most important revenue stream. Our third one is much smaller, but it's also increasing. It's essentially any auxiliary business. Credit interest and some, essentially it's mainly, I would say, interest from credit, overdraft, and consumer lending, and a few other business models that we have on top of that, including treasury. But it's a fairly small business in comparison to the other two pillars.
I'm just going back to your question about Switzerland. You said you don't... Oh, hi, I'm Tamir Hassan. I'm actually also a founder in the document space. But I'm interested about the sort of geolocation and which rules apply. I mean, how do you determine for a customer that could be maybe abroad, have an IP address from God knows where via VPN, the rules of which country and which country's rules apply? For example, is it their address or what other factors?
It's the country where you live. So it's always the country where you legally reside.
Okay, but that could also be several countries.
If you reside in several countries, you have the right to choose which country you choose.
And that's the address, basically.
Pardon?
That's the address that the customer gives.
It's the legal address, correct? However, as a bank, we're different than a regular app. So unlike Facebook, you can log in with your name. They might still ask for your birth date and your email address, but you can fake all that. For a bank, it's a bit different. For a bank, we have a so-called, it's a verification process. When you open the bank, open a bank account, before giving you all the credentials, there is either a video call or a different process where you essentially verify your identity. You have to show your passport, You have to show your face, and this is obviously being checked in the background against potential flags that you might be not saying the truth.
But those are not proofs of address.
It took
Pardon?
38 minutes. I tried it this morning.
For 38 minutes?
I also used ID now. It
Yeah.
took even longer than that.
All right.
But they never wanted my proof of address, though.
The proof of address is where your card is being delivered.
Okay. That makes sense.
So basically,
A hotel
so-
somewhere.
pardon?
A hotel somewhere in an island.
First of all, a hotel is, we would see that. If the address is a hotel or a temporary location, the card wouldn't be sent there. And we have in the background a lot of checks in terms of, is this your real identity? Because this is the number one topic. Is this person a real person? And does it show up somewhere in the registry? For example, in Austria, if you're obviously we collaborate extremely closely with the regulators. The regulator is checking for us all the list of customers. Are they registered in Austria? If you open an account with Austria, we would get back the information, oh, that customer doesn't have a legal address in Austria. So I would say the verification process to make sure we're not a fake person can open the account is quite tight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the inspiring presentation. I'm actually a really fan of N26. So I started in 2015 on my flight to Australia. I onboarded during boarding, so 8 minutes. I think it even took 5 minutes. So that was really good. I have 3 questions actually. First, about the location. Do you think N26 would be as big as it is today if you stayed the headquarters in Vienna and didn't move to Berlin? Second, about the competitors. Do you think Revolut or other digital banks are the biggest competitor for N26, or is it like Google, Apple, or is it Deutsche Bank or Morgan Stanley or some other traditional banks? And the third one is more about your personal development. So you have been working at Boston Consulting Group for 6 years, and then you moved to the startup world, Uber and N26. What skills did you learn in the startup world that you didn't learn at BCG?
Can I start with the last question?
Yes.
So first of all, I can tell you, when I was studying, I was a business student. So I studied my first degree here in Vienna at WU, did part of my studies in France and Russia. And then later on, a couple of years into my job, I did another business degree in the US, in Chicago. My number one regret during my work in consulting was that I didn't study business informatics. I really should have done that because while in consulting, I worked exclusively on technology projects. I worked for massive industrial corporations like Siemens or like such type of companies. I worked for banks, and I even started in telecommunications. I did mining companies, but it was always focused on the topic of how to bring innovation to such companies, how to digitize their processes, and how to bring innovation to them, partially business models, but also new technologies. And I heard probably my path, my work hours were a lot longer than if I had studied the technical studies, because I had to learn a lot on the job. And but ultimately, it was one of the most inspiring ways to learn that, because after my stay in the US, I knew I was totally wrong in management consulting. Because what you do in consulting is basically you help the massive corporations to defend themselves against the small, more innovative players. So I stayed with them another 2 years to make sure that they're paying for my studies in the US, which was pretty expensive, to be fair. But I always knew I'm gonna go to the startup world. So basically, the decision was taken 2 years before I actually made that step. And so you ask about what skills did I need? Well, I think the number one skill is that you're willing to learn. And especially in consulting, it really helped me, because being thrown into new industries all the time, being once working on an industrial project in France and another time for a bank in Russia. That's a really different industry, but at the same time, there's certain things that are similar where I could apply my knowledge and could really help those companies just become more innovative and faster to innovate. But the willingness to learn fast was the number one learning I think took away.
And new skills which you did not learn in consultancy but in the startup?
There are a lot of them. I think I remember in my first week at Uber, people told me, you do know SQL, right? And I said, nope. And I said, well, you better learn that because otherwise you don't have any access to data. So that's what I learned pretty fast, because in consulting, you have the data teams for that. You kind of ask them, hey, can you please do that for me? And that's one of the most stupid ways of doing business, because you always have people to do that. In a startup, that's the main difference in startups versus a big company. You just do everything by yourself. The second skill that you definitely don't learn in consulting versus a startup is leadership. Because in consulting, at best, you lead a small team, 5 to 6 people, all highly educated, super motivated. No matter how long you make them work, they're always happy. Versus in startups, and by the way, and they're all thinking somewhat similar. Even if you put a mathematician, a doctor, and a business person all in the same room, they all become consultants. After 3 years, I can assure you they all think alike. And in consulting, for example, right now, I really love it that the team I build up, I have people in business development, I have creative people, I have a designer, I have a content writer, I have a marketing manager, I have people who are really about creativity. But at the other side, I have people that know about banking processes, banking and payment operations, people that know about how to prevent fraud and to learn about all those sneaky tricks that people try to open an account with, but they shouldn't. So it's a very diverse team, and that's super exciting. On the other side, and this is something what I learned at Uber, it takes completely different skills to manage people that do not have the same educational background as you. It's very easy to manage, for you as a technical university, it's going to be very easy for you to manage other people from your same degree. It's much more difficult to manage a person that it's much more, first of all, much more challenging to manage creative people, because you really need to give them the space. But it's also much more difficult and much more challenging to lead people for, let's say, people without university education. Hire people who are 18, 19 years old. It's their second job. For them, it's just a job. It's more, they may do more manual, more operational work. It's just a very different way of motivating those people than if they have a degree from a great university. But there is no right or wrong. There's no good or bad development path. There's just people. And every single one of them can contribute greatness. And really, every single of your team members can be a vital part of your company. And making sure you make sure that you enable your team to achieve something that every single one of them wouldn't have, but because you enabled them, they achieved much more together as a team than each individual alone. So this is the most important skill I learned in startups. And you had 2 other questions.
Yeah, one about the location.
Yeah.
And the other one.
So I wished to tell you, it was a big mistake to go to Berlin. We should have found it in Vienna. Well, in reality, it's very hard to state now in the hindsight, because it's what if question. At that point, it seemed the right decision. Our first investors suggested that, and although those investors were all Austrians. And in the hindsight, I have to say, there were 3 reasons why we did it. Number 1 reason was investment. Back then, early stage venture capital funds were almost unheard of in Austria. Nowadays, with Speed Invest and some of the other venture capital funds, you really have a very strong VC firm here. So I would say that is something where the reason is much less strong than it was back then. I think nowadays, if you want to get funding early on, you get it in Vienna. The next reason was the market. So starting in Germany obviously enabled us right away to have a bigger market. And in a regulated industry where we knew that we had to have a banking license, it was smart to have a bank license of a large market. For a digital app where you do not have a license, this might be a much weaker reason. In fact, might not be any reason, because if you can deploy your product right away to Germany from Austria, great. And the third reason, and that's something which is still important, is technical talent. In Berlin, nowadays still technical talent is much more established. There's just much more abundant, I would say. And what really helps is that there are a lot of companies, a lot of big companies that employ a lot of technical talent, and it enables people to switch between companies. So we get people from Zalando, smaller startups hire people from us, and there is an exchange. So a lot of former N26 employees founded their own companies later on, some of them fairly successful. And that was, by the way, one of the reasons why we chose Vienna as our destination for our technology hub. We're going to hire 300 people in product and tech in Vienna because we believe the one thing that Vienna is missing is big technology company, late stage startups that really are able to build up this ecosystem. Right now, there are very few cities that really have that. Berlin, London, Barcelona, maybe a little bit Amsterdam, and Dublin. Why is that? There are some large technology companies where people can change. We want to establish such a community here. And one of our biggest prides would be that if in 2 years from now, Facebook says we're going to hire as well, we're going to build up an office here as well, and that we really build up this community. Because I think Vienna is a great place, and we're very confident that in 3 years from now, we're going to have 300 people here. I can tell you later on why we chose Vienna exactly and how we're going to do it. And your second question?
The competition.
Competition. Well, I can tell you our competition is definitely not other challenger banks. Why? First of all, the business model is completely different. We are a bank, and most of our challenger banks aren't. So our business model is already completely different. And in fact, we believe, because we have such a deep understanding of the regulatory world, we're much better suitable to really scale in the long run. But there are 3 different types of competitors. Traditional banks, so essentially there are 3 different type of companies that people would perceive as competition. The traditional banks, the challenger banks, and the tech companies. And out of those, I would say the only serious competitors are tech companies. And we all know all of them work on such products. Why are they competitors? Well, they have not only the funds, they have also the understanding of customers, how to build great products. So we want to make sure that right now we invest enough into innovation that we are ready, if Amazon launches their own checking account in a year from now, that we are ready to go head on head with them. Traditional banks really are in the competition. Why? Frankly speaking, most of our customers come from traditional banks. Competition is typically defined that you fight for the same customers, but we don't. They have them, we get them. So in reality, they are the regional banks and the reason why we're growing. We should say thank you to them, because whatever they're currently doing, they're doing an amazing job helping us grow.
Can I just add this one?
Yeah.
Your customers are probably, excuse me, your customers are probably very young. Is that correct in average?
What do you think is our average age?
25?
It's 32.
Okay, when your customers grow up and, for example, they need a mortgage, they could probably go to another bank,
Yeah.
like Raiffeisen and whatever. How would you do with this? You will probably...
That's the #1 argument I get from traditional bankers when I sit on a panel with them. They tell me, I can tell you, people will want to come a mortgage and they will come to us and they will stay with us their entire life just because they think they will easier get it if they are customers their entire life. In reality, who of you has bought an apartment or has ever, right?
University.
All right, one person, lucky you. So in reality, what you do if you buy an apartment, you do not only go to one bank. You shop around. You go to every single bank and ask them, make us a quote. And you take the offer, you take the mortgage in the bank which gives you the biggest quote, the best price. Because if you buy an apartment and one bank offers you to give you an apartment for 8,000 euros cheaper than another bank, you're gonna take that. No matter, there is no loyalty when it comes to money. And so in reality, when you buy an apartment, this relationship with the bank doesn't really count anyways. However, banks are arguing, well, we give you a better price if you stay with us your entire life. First of all, that's not true. There's no evidence on doing that. Second, what banks are completely underestimating, that I can promise you in 10 years from now, more than 50% of all first-time homeowner buyers will make or set up their mortgage online. We're not going to do it. We are not going to sell them the mortgage, but there are going to be digital mortgage lending businesses. And in fact, they are already now. And in 10 years from now, this is going to be standard. And 10 years from now, traditional banks are going to realize our core business is crumbling as well.
Okay, thank you.
Does this answer the question?
Is your question answered? Because you will be the next, and then Mark
Hi. Hi, my name is Robert. I'm also trying to become a co-founder. So till now I failed so many times. Okay, I have a couple of questions. First question, you said that your mission is to make me fall in love with you. Well, I like you because it's a great product, but I would probably fall in love if you would supply Cyrus or Maestro cards so I can use it every day.
We have Maestro cards.
Excuse me?
We have Maestro cards. You can order them in the app.
But okay, sorry. But I know that you had at the beginning you had only MasterCard. Am I right?
Yeah, since 2016 we offer Maestro cards. But by the way,
so that means that I'm not updated.
But by the way, as you might know, as you might have heard, Sparkasse, Erste Bank, has already decided to kill Maestro altogether. So Maestro, in 3 years from now, Maestro is not going to exist anymore. And you know what they're going to substitute it with? MasterCard Debit, because it's considered to be the most innovative payment card. And Erste Bank very proudly announced we're the first Austrian bank to have it. You know what? Well, we have it as well since 2015.
Yeah, of course. So I have a second question. Did you think about to put cryptos in the game?
Yeah, we thought about it, and in fact, we have obviously as a fintech, we have a lot of employees who are really passionate about that. And in fact, we started building a product, but we, as I also mentioned before, first of all, we're laser focused on what really matters for customers. We build products for customers, and we build them for the mass market of our customers. We want to really solve global problems. And when we made a survey, so essentially we talk to our customers all the time to understand what are the market needs. In September 2017, we asked our customers what kind of crypto product would you like? Or would you like it in general? And then what kind of product you like? Well, back then, more than 50% of our customers replied, yes, we want a crypto product. Well, so we started building it and then iterated what kind of product we were building. Well, then came the infamous bubble bursting, and we made another survey in January 2017, and then 1% of the customers said we really want a crypto product. And we repeatedly asked customers what they really want. Currently, crypto product is not one of our top 10 product requests. But we have an ideas at n26.com where you can submit ideas. We cluster them and see what the majority of customers want. As soon as crypto is one of our top banking needs, we're going to introduce it. Until then, we focus on higher priority topics.
What about have you think about to completely remove the money from the game? Which means it's not a regular money, which means it's not fiat money, and it's also not a crypto. Because in fiat, we know how the banks works, how are the regulations, how is the, I don't know, governments and so on. In cryptos, there is always some kind of limit of coins, and there is always going up, going down, which means it's not secure and so on. So have you think about any solution which is between? Like some kind of a digital money, which is still not the fiat money and it's not a crypto?
I'm not 100% sure whether I really understand the question. However, so our business model ultimately, and our vision is still building a bank the world loves to use. So we are not trying to build something completely otherwise as a bank, but we still try to build something what people can use to pay their regular bills and receive their salary in. So that's our objective essentially. That still is based on regular currency. We will add other currencies later on, dollars, British pound, Swiss franc, etc. But for the time being, that's our business model. Obviously, we are always reacting to new demands. If we have the feeling that there's a huge potential in that, and huge potential means global potential, then we might be considering going other directions as well, of course. But currently, no. Mm-hmm. Oh,
Hi, I'm Maribeth Aquino. My startup, coming from TU Wien as well, my startup is developing a B2B discovery platform for augmented and virtual reality solutions, meaning we are helping companies find the right solution with augmented and virtual reality technologies. So my question is about finding the right place to incorporate, because it is a super strategic decision that you have to make, right? Where are you going to incorporate and have the entire IP? So I was researching that, comparing Vienna, Berlin, and Lower Austria, and trying to figure out where to incorporate. And people always say it's super important. The first 10 to 20 people that you employ are super important because they are going to impact the company a lot. Now, if you're going to Berlin, Berlin is super awesome to incorporate because they offer you 50,000. If you're an innovative tech company, you incorporate there with the IP in Berlin, you immediately get the 50,000 euros cash on hand if you match it with investment money or debt, whatever. So you just get the 50K without competition, not like here, pre-seed by i²c. It's just super easy to get 50K just right away. Mm-hmm. It's just the network. When you move over, we are all Austrians, I guess, based here. When you move over, you have the pool of talent, you have the market, you have all that, and the funds, but the network. If I move over with just a co-founder or my top 2 people, where do you grow in Berlin if you don't have the network yet? Isn't that like an argument so contra to Berlin or to another city? Because you can't grow easily because you don't have the network. It's a lot of work.
That's a very strong argument, correct.
Stronger than money.
50,000 euros is not much for building a business. So, and frankly speaking, I think especially early stage funding has been pretty decent in Austria. You can get i²c funding, you can get grants, which are really pretty solid. I would say where it comes tricky is not at the early stage in Austria. Right now, early stage is very well funded in Austria, very well. In fact, it's very, very well funded.
But it also includes like a lot of work. In Berlin, it would be just a few pages.
The grants are very easy to get. You get up to 200,000 euros in Austria for basically, I wouldn't say nothing, but the first 50,000 should be fairly easy, to be honest. Grants, if you have a good idea, of course. If you have, I would say as a technical co-founder, you're much more destined to really become interesting for them, rather than if you're just a business student that wants to create the next e-commerce platform. But if you have a real novel idea, funding is very good in Austria, and also grants are very good. So I would say there has to be a much stronger reason to move to another city than that. Because as you said yourself, network is extremely important. The people to hire is extremely important. And I can tell you, in fact, the founders had a lot of trouble to hire at the very beginning, and a lot of the first employees came all from Vienna, so they brought them to Berlin. But in fact, Vienna right now has a very strong early and mid-stage startup scene with a lot of great success stories. The one thing that's really lacking is large-scale startups. Companies like N26, Zalando, Rocket Internet, like one of the more successful ones maybe, not the crappy ones. But on the other side, also if you look at Spotify, for example, there are only a few hubs where really these massive companies emerged. And the main reason is they don't emerge just out of an idea, but they attract each other. That's the main reason why Silicon Valley is where all those companies are, because that's where the talent is, and then they can hire a lot of people from there. So you would have to rather think, where's your talent sitting? Especially if you scale up. And you can always have a headquarters still somewhere and then build a second office somewhere else. For example, a good friend of mine I've been very often in Silicon Valley. A good friend of mine, Austrian guy, is living there, building his own business there, has his legal headquarters in Salzburg. Why? Great grants, much cheaper developers, much cheaper, like seriously. And it's a startup. It's very tricky to pay Silicon Valley salaries. So there are a lot of reasons not to go to one of those big cities. In fact, I was at one of the biggest accelerators in Silicon Valley, Plug and Play. They cooperate with Wirtschaftskammer and bring startups over to train there. And they said one of the #1 mistakes they made is they invested into a startup and told them, but we only invest if you move your business from Europe to Silicon Valley. Because you know what happened? It took 3 weeks until Google hired their 2 most important technical people. And then this business was dead. So in fact, it's very dangerous to move also somewhere because your best people might be hired very fast. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Claudia Badiu. I'm also part of the incubator here in TU, and I have 2 short questions. The first one is, how did you acquire your first investor? Who was it, and how did you convince him to put his money into your idea? And the second is, I know you're focusing on the retail market, but are you also investing in startups or something? Yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot.
So the first investor of every startup founder essentially first investors are always your parents and your relatives. It's called FFG, friends, family, and fools, that invest into your business idea. After you've exploited those people enough and burned all their money, then you have to think about proper investors. And the first investors are typically angel investors. So individuals that happen to have a lot of money and want to invest it. And in Austria, there are a lot of them. And in fact, if you go to startup conferences, it's completely insane how many guys, elderly people in suits, running around trying to get to know people. There's a lot of money in Austria like that. So angel investors is the first step. The more important step here is not falling into a trap and taking money too easily, because it's very easy to take 200,000, 500,000 euros and then giving away a quarter of your company to someone you don't fully trust and potentially does not provide you any relevant information or relevant value other than those 500,000 euros. The founders once said the worst investment decision they ever did is accepting 50,000 euros from an incubator that did absolutely nothing to promote their business, but still has now shares worth millions. That's a pretty bad. I mean, they invested fortunately only 50,000 euros back then at a already fairly big valuation. But be careful to whom you give that, especially because those angel investors, they really need to pay off with other things than money. The money you need now, but in order to become successful, you need much more than that. And then it's about VC funds. Their VC funds, they typically have pre-seed investments, starting, for example, Speed Invest, the biggest one in Austria and actually in Central Europe, has a pre-seed fund. And so they invest into typically first-time founders that are not yet at a stage where they really, where it's a lot of money, but they rather need somewhere between, let's say, 50 to 500,000 euros. And then next stage is seed investment, then it becomes a little bit more, and then series A, B, C, etc. And then of course the rounds always get bigger. What's important is with finding investors, find investors who give you insights, and if you find institutional investors, make sure they really believe in your business. The worst thing that can happen to you, a small VC funds invest into your business, just a little bit. They give you 50,000 euros. Very cheaply maybe, but then you try to raise another round, and if those guys decide not to invest anymore into your business and raise their stakes, it's a terrible sign. Because basically what other investments are seeing, well, you're trying to sell us something what not even your owners are trying to increase. So be careful with from whom to take investments. Money is definitely not the number one concern a startup should have, although the focus is so focused on that. But on the long run, if you in order to succeed, money is just a part of it.
Hi there. I'm also a founder at one of the fintech startups here in Vienna. Basically, two questions. One is, can you explain the name N26? And the second question is basically, you guys are doing consumer retail banking. Are you ever going to look into like business banking?
So the answer to the second question is yes. I can't tell you anything more than that. It's just yes. And the first part of the question is name. Well, we were searching a name that represents a metaphor. Because what we are doing at the core is try to present, to making something one of the most complex things in the world, banking, look extremely simple and smooth towards customers. So this metaphor was the Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube is something that, who of you knows how to do a Rubik's Cube? It's great. It's a lot bigger, a lot more people than in most universities. And the thing is, the people who can't do it, I can't do it, frankly speaking. It's very complex. In fact, it looks almost impossible. But if you know how to do it, it gets fairly easy, apparently, people tell me. And in fact, you see there are a lot of even competitions where people do it in a few seconds. Our lesson was that really symbolizes what we are. Something complex transformed to something really simple. And the Rubik's Cube consists of 26 small little colorful cubes. And that's why the name number 26 emerged. And then it was shortened to become more a global brand, N26.
Thank you.
I'm a student here at TU Wien. I have a quick question. Conforming to your vision of becoming a global leader, do you have any plans to go public soon?
Definitely not soon. It's an option we keep open on the long run. But the only reason I would go public is if we believe that we can finance ourselves better through the public market rather than private investors. Right now, we raised so far $500 million US. And in fact, especially with the big investors we have now with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Singapore, they essentially told us, if you need more money, just come. So, I mean, in fact, they have a possibility to invest billions of dollars. So right now, we are not necessarily really dependent on the stock market. But at some point, we might. It's always the big dream of every entrepreneur, IPOing.
Okay, there's one more question. Max?
Earlier you said you can't answer that you moved into business, but today I was asked if I want to use the N26 for using it in my business.
That's something else. It's called, we have something called N26 Business, but it's a freelancer account. So it's not something for a corporation. It's not for a legal entity. But essentially, if you have your own personal business, let's say you're a journalist, you're a designer, and you have revenue, you can use N26 for that. But we do not permit so far legal entities. For example, if you have a company with 20 employees, you cannot have an account with N26 for the company.
So, okay. Go ahead, last question, and then we continue outside.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm a student from the i²c. My question is, how do you make sure that your culture stays the same? Meaning that not suddenly somebody says, okay, we need to make more profit, let's sell everybody insurances and stuff like that. How do you make sure this will not happen in the next 10 years or when you go public or something like that?
So two-part. In fact, I think the culture is not necessarily connected with what you're describing as profitability driven. So I think it's two different things. The culture is one of the most difficult aspects because scaling from 2 people to 1,000 and plus, you can bet there's a few things are changing, but at the same time, what you do not want to lose is your entrepreneurial spirit. You don't want to use your speed and flexibility, and you don't want to become a super inefficient corporation where no one knows what's happening and no one feels empowered. So that's really important. I literally could hold an entire separate session just on how to preserve the culture, but essentially what we're doing is we're empowering our people, giving them a lot of responsibility to really make sure that people feel excited about what they're doing, but also feel the freedom to really create something new and innovative. Another one is to make sure everyone is really on board on this global vision. We're all pulling in the same direction, no matter where you work, no matter whether you're in Berlin, Vienna, Sao Paulo, or New York, everyone is pulling into the same direction. And we all really, truly believe that we can not just build something great, but we can truly change an entire global industry. And the second part of the question was, how do we make sure we suddenly to just change our vision and become super profitability driven rather than customer focused? The big benefit is the biggest shareholders of our company are our founders. So there's no other investor that owns more than them. And that makes sure that it will really remain a founder driven company. And that's very helpful, frankly speaking, that they've always, from this day one, always made sure every investor we're getting on board is also really buying into the vision rather than trying to push their own vision through it. Because if you had one investor that really wants to say, oh, we need to now profitability, blah, 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 then you would have a problem because then you would have essentially a dispute between investors or between owners, basically. That happens within companies. That's why it's super important to pay attention to whom you get on board as part of on your ownership table. Because, maybe to conclude on the last sentence, investors, they are not doing you a favor by investing into your business.
No.
Make sure that the deal you're making is a deal on equal parts. That you're giving them something in exchange, and part of what they're delivering is going to be in the future. And part of what you're delivering is also in the future. So they have to live up to the expectations as well. And always think about if the deal works out properly, if your business becomes big, they're happy. And in the hindsight, as our founder said to our first investor, who was at the Christmas party last year, said, I was really happy to get to know you back 6 years ago. Now I'm pretty sure you were pretty happy that back then we met. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is like a little gift and compensation for the time you invested here. So as for you guys, you know the procedure. Very welcome to join outside for having a drink, and Georg will join in later on. But please move outside so we can do our business in here as usual. And before you leave, I hope you enjoyed, as we did, this year's Founder Investor Talks, summer term investor talks, and I hope to see you again in the winter term, because we kick it off in October again, of course. Stay tuned, follow us, and the ones of you who are interested in joining the i²c on a tutor or a student assistant position should come and talk to me later, okay? So, see you again in October.
By the way, anyone who is not a customer yet, I have a little present for you. Just pick it up if you want.